Hello, everybody. My name is Agnieszka Iłendo-Milewska. I am psychologist, a head of the Faculty of Psychology at the Private University of Pedagogy in Bialystok in Poland. I am a head person and founder of the private primary school in Bialystok and also an expert at the Ministry of National Education. Before I start, I would like to thank for organizing this conference in a safety way. I'm honored to be invited and I'm glad to participate on conference online. The main aim of my presentation is to recognize neuroscientific evidence in the light of self-regulation. First, I will define the main word and explain the theoretical approach. Then I will move to the methodology aids and I present research results, concluding remark and practical implication. I would like to start my short talk from the citation from the article by William Kelly published in Annual Review of Neuroscience. One commonly held view is that humans have evolved specific control system, particularly within the prefrontal cortex, that permit planning and behavioral flexibility. Neuroscience studies discovered that the prefrontal cortex supports high-level cognitive abilities such as working memory, response inhibition, decision-making, and planning. But our knowledge of behavioral deficits is limited. Studies suggest that the damage in the part of the brain causes a profound inability to regulate social and emotional behavior. Now, the ability I'm talking about is not a reading or a writing, it's the ability to self-regulate. Now, for a long time, I have defined dysfunctional behavior as the behavior of naughty children. And then something happened to make me rethink my entire approach. When I finished my study, I wanted to go someplace where I felt really needed, someplace where I could make a difference. So I came to work as a psychologist at middle school, one of the largest schools in the city in terms of number of poor and neglected students. There had been only one psychologist to serve more than 2,000 children, but I tried to provide the best quality of psychological consultation and diagnosis regardless of working time. We targeted the typical dysfunctional behavior, violence, truancy, substance abuse. They understood how important it's move to the point from the area of students' dysfunctional behavior to the area of their potential possibilities and support their growth. It means that when I would like to concentrate on positive side, I wish to show you many definitions of the concept of self-regulation. Self-regulation is defined as the capacity of the individual to delay suppressed behavior, tendencies, and desires to follow social rules. It is the ability to control physical functions and emotions. Self-regulation is the process rather than the act. Where is self-regulation in our brain? Specific control systems are in the prefrontal cortex that permit superior planning and behavioral flexibility. Prefrontal cortex supports high-level cognitive abilities such as working memory, response inhibition, decision-making, and planning. Is the portion of the frontal lobe. And understanding of the brain mechanism can provide valuable insights into how people are able to regulate and control their behaviors and what happens in those situations when they fail to do so. Although neuroscience has formed a relatively clear picture of the brain system that gives rise to reward motivation, but we still need to concentrate on the main factors and system of control that support self-regulation. So it's important to take into consideration the analysis which highlighted connection between self-regulation and positive results. In the area connected with academic achievement, researchers proved that children who have the ability to self-regulate their own behavior are functioning properly at school and achieve higher degrees. In the field of engagement in school activities, we know that self-regulating adolescents tend to work harder than their peers who lack self-regulating abilities. So researchers raise two critical questions: whether individual differences in reward cue reactivity reflect differences in the sensitivity of the reward system from one person to the next, or rather are the consequences of individual difference in self-control. Let me give you another example. Each of us had a contact with students whose behavior is not improving. Then we undertake a lot of different methods and techniques of interaction. For example, when student has an educational difficulties, such as problem with reading, then teachers help him to improve reading skills and organize extracurriculum lessons. However, when difficulties in behavior appeared, teachers designate punishment, often when something happens and as an incidental action. It means that we take an action, but we still experience that despite the fact that we have taken all available methods and techniques of interaction, students' behavior is not improving. The actions are not effective? No, some youth need more support with self-regulation than others. Greater levels of support are needed for youth who have self-regulation difficulties due to adverse childhood experiences, which may include physical or emotional abuse or mental illness, and individual differences, which may be due to, for example, genetic factors. Emotional and social distress can cause self-regulation failure and lead to dysfunctional behavior, also may directly influence self-regulation control mechanism. I would like to highlight two theories as the theoretical background: the self-determination theory and the concept of Baumeister's self-control. The first of the theories that I am going to discuss indicated the level of motivation and describes autonomous and controlled motivation. Autonomous motivation focuses on the behavior that a person chooses which has a specific value for them. Controlled motivation focuses on the behavior that a person chooses to avoid punishment or to get a reward. This theory stressed the important role of satisfying the basic psychological needs and focused on the three universal needs: the need of the competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Experiencing high level of autonomy means that a person is able to self-regulate their behavior, to be active, responsible, and show self-discipline. I would like to draw your attention to the concept of Baumeister's self-control. As you can see on this slide, self-control is the short-term process which refers to the internal resources to enable change of the reaction as a result of, for example, a situation of social pressure. The theory states that resources are limited. For example, studies show that a person who does two tasks, one after another, does the second task worse, because some of the resources are limited. The effect of depletion of self-regulation can be modified by motivation and incentives and positive emotions. Theoretical background leads me to the methodology of this research. I define the independent and the dependent variables which are strongly linked with theoretical background. The indicators of student self-regulation are autonomous and controlled regulation. The ability to control include internal and external locus of control. The level of motivation determines internal and external motivation. And we have three basic psychological needs: the need to belong, to be competent, and to be autonomous. The quality of students' functioning in the school environment is presented in the area of the quality of contact with teachers and the degree of experience of the condition that's supporting students' growth. The measure the aspects of self-regulation, 5 psychological questionnaires were used. The self-regulation questionnaire learning, the questionnaire for locus of control study, school motivation questionnaire, basic psychological needs scale, and the questionnaire lesson assessment students. The research took place among 254 middle school students aged 13-15 in a public primary school in Bialystok in the period from November 2018 to February 2019. In the field of self-regulation, the results suggest that girls possess a higher mean of values of self-regulation. It's important for girls to get a good mark, to fulfill their obligation as best as possible. They want to be proud that they do tasks as best as they can. But on the other hand, girls also state that it's easier for them to do what they are told by the teacher than think autonomously. And what is also important, students of 8th grade declare that it's easier to do what I'm told than to think about it. The achieved results suggest that the higher the autonomous self-regulation, the higher the level of student self-control will be, and the higher the level of student self-consciousness will be. Girls possess a higher means of values of self-regulation, but they present a dependent attitude. The analysis of responses in the field of school motivation shows that girls have a higher level of self-awareness and external motivation than boys, but lower level of self-control and autonomous motivation. The achieved results suggest that the higher the autonomous self-regulation, the higher the level of students' autonomy motivation will be, and the higher the level of students' self-awareness will be. But we have to remember that girls may be less persistent in action, feeling low responsibility for results and possible failures. In the field of satisfying the basic psychological needs, students 7th grades declare that they do not like the people with whom they interact. Students of 8th grades declare that they do not feel very competent, and when they are in the company of peers, they feel controlled and feel pressure. And it turned out that autonomous self-regulation is strongly linked with all the basic psychological needs: autonomy, satisfaction, and competence needs. It means that the higher the autonomy motivation, the higher the level of student satisfaction needs will be, and the higher the level of students' competence will be. The higher the self-control, the higher the level of students' competence needs will be. It could be also stated that students have an external locus of control on the scale of failure and also on the scale of success. Data shows that the class level is different in the area of control on the scale of failure. In the area of self-control on the scale of success, it turned out that generally students have an external locus of control, but girls have a higher level of internal locus of control than boys. Generally speaking, students have an external locus of control and low level of self-esteem, but students 8th grades have controlled regulation and have high level of self-consciousness. The results of my own research indicate that in contemporary education, teachers have to increase higher level of autonomous self-regulation among boys, because girls are able to self-regulate their behavior, to be active, responsible, and show self-discipline. But on the other hand, when the girls' activity is directed by the teacher's advice, teachers have to encourage girls to think autonomously. Research confirms that teachers should enhance students' internal locus of control and their engagement of school life, especially among boys. How we can help students develop self-regulation in a daily practice. Teachers have to engage students in decision-making process, upregulate using, for example, breaks, movement breaks, downregulate using, for example, music, try to adapt self-control games. And going to the end of the presentation, I would like to tell you my fundamental self-regulation principle. Love them first, teach them later. Thank you for your attention.